Welcome to Breaking Cycles, Building Leaders, Youth Empowerment and Action, presented by American Student Assistance in partnership with Free to Dream, a nonprofit founded by the artist and activist Common. I'm Mike Murphy, Director of Strategic Communications and Campaign Management at ASA, and I'm honored to be moderating today's conversation. At ASA, we believe that every young person deserves the opportunity to discover their purpose and plan for success, no matter their background, environment, or the systems they've had to navigate. Far too often, young people impacted by incarceration, foster care, immigration challenges, or policing systems are not seen for their potential. They're underestimated. There are about 5 million what we call opportunity youth in the United States, and that is young people who are neither working nor in school. And that includes about 700,000 who are actively involved in the justice system in some way. Many of these young people grow up to feel like they don't even have permission to dream, that the barriers around them are too high or that opportunity is out of reach. But that couldn't be further from the truth. That belief that every young person does have the right to dream big, to imagine something more, is the foundation of the I Am Free to Dream campaign and the partnership that helped bring this conversation to life. Today's discussion is about possibility, it's about power, and it's about what happens when we trust young people not only to share their stories, but to lead, design, and drive solutions that center healing, dignity, and justice. I'm thrilled to be joined by three visionary leaders who are helping to embody that spirit every day. And so I'm going to turn it over to my three panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their organizations.
Good morning for those of you who are on the West Coast, afternoon to everyone else. My name is Calvin Williams. I am the Senior Advisor for Social Impact to Common and support the work of Free to Dream. As Mike mentioned, we are a partner of ASA in the work of the Free to Dream campaign, where we're engaging opportunity youth and really inspiring, taking inspiration rather from young people's inspiring dreams about what the future can be when it's rooted in their most just and joyful future for themselves and for others. And that includes what it looks like to look back for us to look forward in that spirit of Sankofa, what it means to look back to say, here are the ways that we can heal some of the harms that have been created when one of us harms one of us, and when systems harm us and prevent us from being able to realize those dreams to full fruition. So I'm looking forward to sharing more about the work that we do, and really privileged to be in this conversation with some people who are brilliant and amazing leaders who inspire our vision of what it means to root our work in restorative justice. So I'll pause there because I want to make sure we get enough time to hear from them as well. I'm here to amplify the light that we have in partnership with amazing organizations that do this work on the day-to-day.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning again to those who are on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. My name is Abrigal Forrester. I'm the CEO for the Center for Teen Empowerment. Our mission is to employ, train, and empower youth in collaboration with adults to create peace, equity, and justice. What that really means is that we hire young people and bring them into the organization, really put them through this process of like a group process where they unpack some of the trauma and the everyday challenges that they face. But we don't stop just at that unpacking. The main goal that we have is to build their capacity around their organizing and leadership skills, and really help young people understand that they have the intellectual capacity to create strategies to solve community-based problems. And so we build their capacity, and then they become peer ambassadors to their network of friends and their sort of circle of influence. And then they bring those issues out to the community and actually put on agendas. The adult staff, we step back and allow those young folks to lead. And then they create strategies that lead to movements to address those policies. And what happens is to address those issues. So what it looks like is those young folks then come together, they power map, think about those issues, figure out where those issues are, and then they begin to identify what the target resolution is, and then they work towards that resolution. So that's how we work. We're located in headquarters in Boston, Mass. We started in Boston, where we have 3 sites and an additional program. And then we have a chapter outside of Boston, which is in Greater Boston, Somerville, Mass. And we're also in Rochester, New York, where we have a headquarters, 4 sites and 3 programs. So that's where we operate from. And I'm grateful to be here to talk about what is in front of us and actually think about the freedom for young people to dream. So grateful to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sochi Larios, born and raised in South Hayward, California, which is the heart of the Bay Area. I'm currently calling in from SoCal, just here for a few days for a conference representing courage in many, many different ways. I'm formerly incarcerated, system impacted, both from the child welfare system and the juvenile justice system. I was in and out of juvenile hall from the age of 12 all the way to my 17th birthday. Courage actually met me when I was incarcerated, and I could like proudly say that courage has definitely helped me heal, grow, and thrive. And now currently leading a lot of systems change, both statewide, locally, statewide, but then also nationally. And that's really just the mission and statement that courage literally goes by. Courage unlocks the leadership of young people. We are located in Oakland, California, in the Fruitvale. We just opened our doors to our youth power zone, which is literally across the street from the Fruitvale BART station. And we're currently gonna build up this new model where we'll have power zones for young people across the state where they have a place that they can call themselves, that they can call home. And that's just in short a little bit of what courage does.
Thank you so much. So we're going to head into some questions, and I'm going to first pose this to the whole group. So each of you, as you all sort of touched on, brings really personal experience to this work. So can you share a bit how your own lived journey shaped your leadership path?
Yeah, I can start out. Abrigal Forrester here again from the Center for Teen Empowerment. My lived experience really shaped my path because it's my lived experience that informs how I help to support delivering the work that we do, not only in teen empowerment, but just across the spectrum of the tables that I sit at. I also was incarcerated. I did 10 years of incarceration here in the state of Massachusetts, probably one of the first young people that received a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence without any good time. And so in that experience, though, I learned a lot about myself, right? And not only from just being incarcerated, but prior to that, how my lived experience informs the work that I do is because I was one of those kids who I felt like even when I started in the education system was really neglected, right? It was really not provided safe spaces in order to unpacked a lot of the trauma that I was dealing with in my own life. Many of you may know, Boston, Massachusetts was the center of busing. So I grew up on the front end of that busing experience, which was traumatic in itself. But I never forget transitioning from a school that was in a white neighborhood to another school that was primarily in a black neighborhood. And what I always tell people, it's like I went to a school that was like the movie Lean on Me, where when I went in that school, it was like a prison, and I was impacted by people who looked like me. And I was so inspired to go to a school with people that looked like me. But then there was another set of trauma and another set of drama. And so I didn't have those protective factors that I needed to navigate. And so one of the things that I think about a lot when I think about young people is how are we making sure that, the protective factors that they need to be their best selves are in place. Fast forward to when I ended up incarcerated and living life and doing living to the street culture, so to speak. I asked myself, how did this young person who was ranked in tennis, quite frankly, tennis was the first sport that I played, a student from first to fifth grade. How did this kid now end up with 10 years in prison? The thing that was a highlight for me was that I had a lot of stuff inside of me, things that I didn't express, I didn't talk about, that really reshaped my attitude and the things that I became susceptible to in my teenage years. And so for me, as I think about the goals and missions of organizations that I work with or tables that I sit at, I start with thinking about the young people and what's in their core. Are they getting a space and place where they can unpack their experiences, their trauma, the things that they're frustrated about, so it doesn't reshape their attitude and that determines their aptitude? And so a lot of that in my lived experience is the things that kind of influence how I think about leadership, how I think about leading an organization, how I think about how we live out the work that we do in the context of trying to help young people find themselves and stay on the path to a positive outcome.
Excellent. And Xochitl, and anything to add there from your own lived experience and how that may have informed your own journey?
I think for me, I'm currently 26. I've been out of the Juvenile Justice Center for about 7, going on to 8 years. And I really appreciate that kind of framework because when I was released, I was on probation, and Courage was that safe place. And now we're kind of, we're asking folks to kind of invest in that vision. So that's kind of what that led kind of our youth power zone, where we realized that these systems are just systems of surveillance, and oftentimes they kind of don't really understand that young people do need a place, besides the schoolhouse, besides that environment, like the street culture, where young people are often being criminalized for just being themselves, just being young people. And I think for me, one of the things that I have learned, that I like to tell our young people, is that systems change is hard. It's not easy, but if there's always strategic partnership within different spaces where you can kind of tap into to kind of learn. Like I know this is going to sound kind of cheesy, but there's 7 days out the week, there's 7 ways, there's always going to be a way for you to figure it out. But young people do need a place for them to be themselves, and for them to be supported. Otherwise I wouldn't be in the position where I am today. And also, one thing that I always tell my young people is that I learned actually from George Galvez, our executive director, is the framework that culture heals. I really had to understand my culture, and I knew that if I wanted to go back and give back to my community, that I needed to understand like where my pain was coming from, where my family's frustration was coming from, that it wasn't my mom's fault, it was the system's fault. There's systems failure that fails Black and Brown communities, and you can see it in their budgets. You can see it in what our parents have gone through and stuff like that. So one of the things that George Galvez, our executive director, has always taught me is that we organize for the love of our people, not for the hate of our enemy. So it's really important for us to love our people and love where we come from, and not be so stuck in the hate that we have for the system failure. So for me, I came back into the Juvenile Justice Center because I wanted for young people to see themselves in my shoes, that I wore the same khaki pants as you did, I wore the same green shirt as you did, and I'm coming back to make sure that you guys understand that there's other ways that you guys can make it out, and you guys don't have to keep repeating that same cycle of harm that the system doesn't address. They don't address that the barriers and the reason and the root causes of why we entered the system in the first place.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and I think it speaks to kind of the need to self-blame, internalize a lot of the things that are happening because of structural issues that are outside of the youth themselves. So I think it's really important to also ground that in the cultural understanding, as you spoke to cultural understanding of where you come from and your generational trauma and how that also informs your life. So Calvin, anything to add there about your own journey and how that informed your path now?
Thank you for this question, and thank you to my fellow panelists sharing your truths and experiences, and sharing that wisdom and that medicine that you received through that. I see how you're taking that and weaving it into something positive and powerful. I found myself in a similar journey where turning something that was a trauma into a medicine. It took a long time. It took a lot of work. But it was the journey. I think about my journey as a son of a father who passed away at 37, 4 months before I was born. Someone who experienced some deeply traumatic experiences in his life, and knowing that had an impact on his health. Someone who's a nephew of some of uncles who I've lost. I call it losing them on both sides of gun violence, right? Someone who lost their life to gun violence, someone who took a life for gun violence, and experienced some about a generation inside the state California, in Solano State, in San Quentin. I come to you as a brother and a cousin of folks who I lost, and lost time with, a homie who lost time from and time with, folks who experience being inside or in and out, or just caught up in a cycle, where I think about it as a generation of us who were too often locked out, locked up, or locked down from the opportunities where we could tap into our dreams. So when we talk about this mission of being able to create a space where young people are free to dream, it's not from just a poetic place. It's an intentional place. To dream of something different than the stories that we carry, not only in our lives, but also our families' lives and our lineage, to dream of something better for our families and for ourselves, starting from that place of power. And so that's what called me in my journey. But I think it's most important for me to talk about my what brings me to this moment today is my journey as a father. My son just turned 6 this past weekend, just turned 6. Beautiful boy. And I think about the conversations of community justice and safety right now. I do not want policies made in the name of protecting my son to be the same exact policies that will be used to punish, penalize, and prosecute him when he turns 16. And we see that pipeline happening, and we have seen that happen with data, with stories, and in our lives, right? Of what it looks like when we continue to invest in a system of a school to prison pipeline that invests in a culture and a system of mass incarceration. And we know, and we've seen the promises of investing in a system of restorative justice and investing in a culture of restorative justice and what that looks like. So for me, both as a professional calling, but also as a personal calling, for us to shift what is possible in the dreams of our young people, including that dream of that 6-year-old child I call my son, and all the others, all of them are all of our children, right? What do we need to invest in? How do we invest? Who do we invest with to ensure that all of our young people are free to dream of that? I love it how you said it, Shoujo, like where everyone can heal, grow, and thrive. And so that's my call to action today.
Excellent. And kind of going on that same note, Free to Dream really centers creativity and imagination, something that's been at the heart of Common's work for many years. So how does storytelling or art open space for healing and transformation?
One principle that comes to mind when we talk about the impact of culture is that culture shift often precedes the policy shifts, or at the very least, it gives the culture gives the fertile soil for the policy shifts to take ground when you plant that seed. We've had in California a number of policies that have been implemented at the speed of bureaucracy, but at the very least passed and implemented around restorative justice. But what we found is that we needed to also shift the hearts and minds that restorative justice, particularly when it's grounded and rooted in the community, is an effective alternative to this system of punishment and punitive. I won't even call it justice. I won't give justice that besmirch. But when we focus on that punitive and punishing approach to when a harm is done in our community, when one of us harms one of us. So the storytelling really is about uplifting what works, because we have such deep and a deep and wide reach of partners who do this work on the day-to-day, where we've seen promising stories and evidence-based practices of what it looks like when restorative justice is not just a policy, but a cultural shift, and also a shift that creates practices that creates the outcomes we want to see. Reductions in recidivism, reductions in contact with the justice system, and also being able to measure how restorative culture can give the space for young people to heal, grow, and thrive. So the storytelling is not only telling the stories that make us feel good, although that is important. It is about that shift that needs to happen. I'll end with this. When Common goes to visitations, be it in juvenile facilities, adult facilities, or folks and families who have been impacted by mass incarceration, he asks the question, what's something that I can come back to the community and tell folks? What do you want me to share when I take your messages back home? And invariably, he will hear a version of this where people will say, Remind them that we are not monsters. Remind them that we are still human. And to be human then means that you have the ability to have light, that you can grow, you can transform, you can change, and that you still have a story to tell. And for us to be able to amplify that, amplify their light, their stories, and create a platform for that exchange where some people who aren't able to go inside and have those kind of conversations, one-on-one, small listening sessions with groups, they could hear and learn it. And our belief is once we get that relationship and be proximate with folks and their stories that in an intimate way, it will shift the hearts and minds to have a different cultural imagination of what's possible in our policies.
It's so powerful. And I know Abrigal, that the Center for Teen Empowerment is doing a lot of this work in the communities that it serves. It's been rooted in community change for decades. So for Abrigal, excuse me, how do you help young people who face systemic barriers see themselves as leaders and change makers when so often the external narrative is telling them otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, we're using this word restorative, right? And I think like one of the ways that it's important, I wrote down here, just going back to the storytelling that Calvin so eloquently talked about. I think, we talk about storytelling, I think about storytelling for the purpose of healing and then healing for the purpose of clarity, right? And so like there's this process in storytelling that is transformative, right? But you can still tell a story to tell a story. But when it's for the purpose of healing, meaning that there has to be challenge in storytelling as well for people to dig deep into their story. Because if I'm giving you my story and it's just from a surface standpoint, the healing is not really happening because I'm not digging deep into the hurt, the pain, and the and the damage that process has done to me or that experience has done to me. And so one of the ways that we make sure that we help to unleash or open up young people to the reality of who they are and the power that they possess is by making sure that the storytelling is not from a surface standpoint, but it's from a standpoint where they first and foremost feel like they're in safe space, number one. And that safe space is first created by adults who are in that space who also need to storytell, right? I think that, even with what Calvin was talking about with the 6-year-old, I have 5 children, and I think about how the disconnect sometimes between adults and even in parenting is like sometimes we say, don't do or I get it without sharing why. And so the reason why I get it when I talk to my boys is because they know my story. I've story told. They've been in sessions where they hear who their father was, good, bad, or indifferent, right? Because there's lessons in all of the experiences. The reason why I'm qualified to say, hey, kid, don't pick up a gun. You don't want to deal those drugs. It's because I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt and the con number, right? And so this is the qualification. So the way that we do that here at Teen Empowerment is we create this group space where young people, they make their own pact and agreement that by being hired to come in and to do this work, that we're going to agree to be transparent. We're going to be willing to dig deep with each other, and we're going to build a bond through that transparency that's not even created by saying that we're going to bond, but the experience and the alignment with the bonding creates that connection, right? And when we talk about restorative justice as a model that we use and leverage as well, I always say that there's like, we use restorative justice as a word that's like a sexy way of talking about the healing process, but restorative justice has different models that's layered into it, right? There's the conflict resolution piece, there's the healing piece, there's the resilience piece. So you got to know what framework in restorative justice are you working from? Because everybody talks about this piece, right? But it's important to understand that, like, given the context of what's happening and the dynamic that you're in, whether it's a victim and a perpetrator, or it's a group where you have a young people who are hurting, you have to enter into that restorative justice process in a way of understanding what framework are you leveraging in restorative justice. And so we're sure to look at that level first and understand whether or not this is a moment that calls for healing and unpacking, going through that process of unpacking the hurt, the pain, so that they can get clarity about purpose. And or is this a perpetrator victim moment, right? And that can be a perpetrator's victim moment because you have 2 different factions of young people who are from 2 different neighborhoods. One neighborhood hurt the other neighborhood. So there needs to be healing in that in itself before those young people in that space can get along and move forward. So really understanding like the dynamics and using a lens of a facilitator's lens and listening in and hearing from the audience of young people actually directs how restorative justice can be leveraged and used as a part of storytelling in my mind, and also how we do a restorative process that leads to healing and gives young people the clarity about how they would like to move forward.
Yeah, so it's really about reframing the stories that the young people tell themselves about their own lives as well, and the stories the narratives that we give them about themselves. So Chil, you've turned your own experience in the system into advocacy. So speak kind of on that storytelling vein. What advice do you give to young people who feel unseen or silenced, and how do you sort of instill hope in them to make them feel like they really have something to contribute?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I'm thinking about my young person right now. He's been incarcerated for 5 years, and we're from the same community, born and raised in South Hayward. We were both in and out of the juvenile justice system. He's a little bit younger than me, and he has, been fighting this adult transfer case for 5 years. And I really appreciate Common. Actually, he worked with our organization and he came down to see our young people because here in California, we closed down our the Division of Juvenile Justice. And basically it's our juvenile prison. So what that did basically it allowed all the counties to basically scale up their juvenile facilities that are not meant for long-term lockup, because judges couldn't send young people to the Division of Juvenile Justice, which was the juvenile prison. And it was really hard for him. We have to think about the mental health piece that young people have to go through when they're fighting their cases and they're directly impacted. And one of the things that I have done, just being there, done that, been incarcerated in and out of that facility, that same facility that he's in. Now that I have the privilege to come back into that same facility, and me and Courage, we work together to create these events, and that's kind of how we were able to get Common inside, because we already built kind of like um, this partnership with probation, right? Because they believed in the work, they're believing in everything that we're doing. So that really is like the long-term investment in what we talk about, like storytelling and outcomes of our young people, is really like not just young people to see that it's working, but it's also for system partners to trust community-based organizations, because at the end of the day, this is where young people are going to end up at. And one of the things that I encourage my young people to do who are serving long-term sentences or fighting adult transfer cases that are usually lengthy, I always teach them how to get into a leadership role. If they're already in the community doing a leadership role, whether it's being in the streets, being gang involved, hustling and trying to get a dollar out of a bag or whatever they're trying to do, you have to understand that their mindsets is already in this, like, they had to grow up fast, and they're becoming those big homies that oftentimes their homies are already serving time in prison. So they're playing a leadership role also in the family, because maybe pops passed away, maybe mom's passed away, maybe mom's is on drugs, maybe pops is on drugs or in prison. So I always see my young people as a blessing and as sacred. And that's something that Courage had to teach me, that I wasn't the problem, that the problem is bigger than I am. So just back to that one young person, we train them up to play MC roles. And there's 3 major events that we have in Alameda County's Juvenile Justice Center, where we're actually bringing all young people from different units. Mind you, all these young people have different parenting styles. They're from different hoods, different backgrounds, different language, and they get to come out in the blacktop, and they get to support that narrative that we're building here in this space, saying that if our youth are sacred, how can we also teach them to be in that same space together? And they come together, and the systems basically kind of put that narrative in the news that, oh, these young people are super predators, these young people are unremorsable, or these young people are committing crime, oh, they're young, they're doing this and that, but we don't think about putting them in positions of leadership. And I always tell my young person, he always calls me the night before when the event happens. He's like, Sochi, I can't do the MC. I can't talk to 100 people. I can't talk to this, and that person. I always remind him that forgiveness is not somebody, you're not offering other people forgiveness. You're forgiving yourself, because I don't want you to pick at the bad things that, because he thinks about the crime that he has done, right? And oftentimes that follows us, but we have to remind our young people that um, when you temporarily forgive yourself, you're opening up new doors and new opportunities, so you can see yourself in that vision of the best version of yourself, because that's literally um, what we're trying to push for. So that's kind of like the advice that I give my young people when they're in positions of leadership, especially in a carceral setting where literally all eyes are on you and you're practicing modern day slavery.
So when we talk about, and I'm going to pose this question first to you, so this is Sochil, and then we can head over to Abrigal. When we talk about restorative justice and youth empowerment, what does that actually look like in practice?
I need to mute myself. In practice, one of the things that we actually have done, back to the juvenile justice model about having events and kind of pushing community-based organizations to come meet where the young people are at. It's hard, it's not easy. It's also creating leadership pipelines for young people. So as they're coming out, Courage has built a really strong relationship and using an inside outside model where we're also in juvenile hall, but then also we're creating spaces for young people as when they come home, they also have a job, because we know that young people, there's a reason why they got uh, into the we're in the bad situation that they're in. So that's one of the things that we have done is allowing young people when they step down to a camp or step down into their community, or the judge releases them to their community, that Courage has a place for them to also continue that leadership, and that's holding circles, just like Abrigal was talking about, and making sure that young people are addressing their trauma, and also talking about and creating those safe places, but also paying our young people, creating cohorts where young people are also having other spaces where they can see themselves in other young people's shoes, and then also bringing them up to the capital. It's really important for young people to know, like, okay, you've healed, now you're leading these spaces, and then you're growing and you're stepping out of your community, because a lot of them haven't really stepped out of their community. So we go to the Capitol so they can meet their legislator, so they can meet their people that actually people that actually have the power to change and shift the environments that they are in.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I would add to that and just, say a couple things around that I think about. One is, when you build young people's ability to lead with confidence and they start to see how their voice, their presence actually can make a difference, it has one, a ripple effect, but it also pulls them through, right? Like when you get in psychology, and my undergrad is in psychology, and we should talk about counseling, right? And they say, always remember to take away a win, because you might have 15 people and only three people out of the 15, really latches on in the moment to what it is you're trying to counsel them through. But those are wins, right? And so like we all need wins to pull us through. And so that process and trying to create those circumstances where young people feel like their voice is actually being heard and creating a win is critical. I think the other piece of it too is, you know, when you start to empower young people, they understand that in spite of, I can still navigate, right? I think what I don't want to say your name wrong. I think it's how you say it, Sochi.
Yes. So.
Okay. Yes. What she's talking about in her presentation and bringing herself to spaces is that we are examples of the fact that like the big mountain that feels like you can't conquer, we've conquered it in some ways, right? Albeit I would never say that I've arrived. I'm also always evolving. But the one thing I can be is an example that if you've lost your way, if you've been incarcerated, if you've here I am in front of you as CEO of an organization where people told me that this wouldn't be possible. And I'm telling you, you are me and I am you. I usually use the acronym that comes from back in the days, clothing line. I'm gonna age myself, the FUBU, which is for you, by you, right? And that's usually how I preface a lot of what I go into with young people. I say like, this is for you, by you, right? So even the restorative practice or the program that we generated called Visions for the Future. Like there's a gentleman who's leading that. That's my director of violence prevention. He did 30 years of incarceration. I have mentors who are part of that process that all did no less than 15 years of incarceration. So they can't say that they can't because we are standing in front of them as possibilities to pull them through. And I think the last thing I would say is that, real empowerment is about really layering in young people or in anyone a level of expertise, understanding, and knowledge so that they are making informed, and that they're not only bringing their voice to circumstances, but they're bringing an informed, educated, knowledgeable voice, right? And that's a little bit different than just having a voice. I can go home and say to my kids, hey, you guys are empowered. What do you want for dinner tonight? They're going to say pizza, Dad, hamburgers, fries. But if they're informed, they may say, Dad, let's do a little salad, with a little bit of, with some protein. And their language, their vernacular will change in regards to what they request. Not saying they may not have a night or two where they want pizza, but they understand the balance in that because they really are empowered to understand what's best for them in a sense of where they're trying to get to. So, those three layers for me, youth leading with confidence, understanding how to navigate life's experiences and helping them go through scenarios where they play the tape so that they can get to circumstances and understand how to navigate so they're not caught off guard. One of the biggest things that I've learned is play the tape in your head. When you play the tape, mind over matter. If you're able to understand what the things are that are coming your way and prepare well to navigate or respond to those things, they don't catch you off guard. And then lastly, the piece that I said, just actually giving them the knowledge, the expertise, and having them have an informed voice, I feel is really critical.
And from your Boston perspective, I guess what's working and what still needs to change in order to make systems actually more restorative?
Yeah, I mean, what's working? I mean, I think that I'll speak for for Boston in a sense. We have a lot of what I call advocates and watchdogs. We've been fortunate to have a lot of people don't kind of recognize this, but Malcolm X walked the streets of Boston. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We got the Mel Kings, who's like one of the first Black men who ran for mayor. Like we have a lot of history here, and I think that the piece that's working is that there are people who have advocacy in their spirit, right, of the movement. But what's getting in the way is creating spaces, right? Too many adults continue to try to hold on and be in the moment without passing on and actually developing the next generation to be the next folks who are sitting at the table. And so I think a lot of times we're not transferring the information and we're not really mentoring enough so that the next generation that's coming up don't have to start from the beginning. But I would say that's on both ends of the spectrum. I think some young people also have, because of the trauma, have their own blockage or pushback against adults, because I always say that we need to have conversations where they're real, transparent conversations about how youth feel like adults have failed them, right? Let's be quite clear. We continue to ask Black and brown young people to do more work. And I want to be mindful that when we pull them into discussions around policy and solving community issues, we are asking young people who should not even have to think about these things in some ways to do more work. So I want to lift up and honor that and say, how do we create spaces where there can be healthy exchanges? And that's why in our mission it says in collaboration with youth and adults, because the job is to try to get youth and adults to get off of their pedestal, work together, so we're not starting from scratch to keep things moving forward. And just one last point that I'll make is that, one thing about Boston, we are resource rich, but connection poor. And people are not working together to create real continuous pipelines to get young people to where they want to be. Not where we want to be, but actually to where they want to be, meaning from if they're in elementary, why aren't we creating pipelines where they can touch different processes, be in a process where they're touching the different entities and spaces that actually springboard them right where they need to be?
Excellent. And sort of on a similar vein, Sochi, Courage's Dream Beyond Bars project reimagines the juvenile justice system. What are some lessons that others, whether in a different state or a different area, take from that model and from that vision?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your comments, Abrigal. I just echo everything you've said. We also here in the Bay, we have something where our young people, like we we don't really do schooling where we try to teach and lean and learn and create spaces for young people to learn. And one of the things that we always ask our young people is definitely feedback, and just that collaborative process. And something that I always teach, because I also sit as the vice chair in this policy table, that I always try to tell the DPOs and the JIOs and the young people that they're partners. They're, don't treat them so much as like, oh, this is my client, this is my attendee, like this is someone's son, this is someone's uncle, like this is your partner. And I think when you start creating that partnership, young people get to see themselves like, oh shit, like I actually can now reclaim my story and write my story with this person, versus actually this person telling me what to do and how to do it. They don't even know me, so I really appreciate you kind of saying that, because that's some of the similar work that we do here. And in that spirit, in our Dream Beyond Bars campaign, we're trying to continue building models like the Youth Power Zone as an alternative to incarceration. Participatory research, oftentimes there's this disconnect that research, there's always other people researching us, but when can we actually research our communities? And one of the things that we've currently done is there's this new diversion program called NOAB here in Alameda County, where we're trying to divert more young people away from the system, or actually entering the system, because they have acknowledged that it's a harmful system. And Courage partnered with other organizations to kind of create this participatory research kind of questionnaire. The young people, we got a cohort of young people. The young people were able to go out in the community and do focus groups and actually lead them and know what and know how to pull out different main ideas from the transcripts. So when you start teaching young people how to do stuff like that, you're also able to create their skills to be transferable, so they can actually, maybe they don't want to be an organizer, maybe they don't want to do systems change, but when you're allowing young people to kind of take lead, they're able to transfer their skills and being able to use it in a different way in their own lives, and actually break cycles within their family, because social change really starts at home. And so they can actually impact other young people around them. And that would also add, in the spirit of the campaign, our youth power zone model. It's like, instead of prison cells, youth have access to a supportive environment, just like Abrigal was talking about. They have access to also nutritional meals. A lot of young people, they don't have food at the house sometimes. So I encourage, in our program on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we actually, from our food justice program, we give them food, a hot meal for young people to come to. We have literally all our closets stocked up with snacks, so they can come drop in and see what's going on in the community, but also have a snack that they can take home, along with a cultural healing practices and programs. We really believe in the healing aspect, and making sure that young people are connected to their ancestral roots, which actually really helped me heal. And life coaching and that peer mentorship, because for me, I wouldn't be in this position if there wasn't mentors like George, there wasn't mentors like Mark and other individuals that I could really proudly say that are still here and actually were patient with me. I didn't get it right the first time, and I think oftentimes we kind of want young people to get it right away, but we have to be patient, and we have to be there every step of the way, if we're actually going to do what we're doing.
I think you're muted, Mike.
So sorry about that. Yeah, so Sochi, one of the things you said around cultural healing and around agency and making sure that we're putting young people in the driver's seat is really important and really central to the I'm Free to Dream campaign as well. So to Calvin, one of the marquee projects of the campaign is the Dreamkeeper Resource Toolkit, which is a pedagogical framework for young adults or for adults working with young people to help them understand not only the transformative power of dreaming, but also how to map those dreams to tangible opportunities in the real world. So can you talk a little bit about the toolkit stages and how they're being used?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll be happily sharing that with all of you who are joining us for this webinar. The Dream Resource Toolkit is engaged and designed for those of you who see yourselves as dream keepers, being the community of caring people in direct relationship with young people, because our pedagogy is rooted in this principle that, some of you have heard this or say this or a version of this, that those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. There's a B side to that that I think is necessary to acknowledge, is that those who are closest to their dreams are closest to our future. And what is the future that we want to build together that is joyful, that is just, and create that space for those dreams to, and those who dream them, to live and thrive. So the 5 steps to creating this process, and that we call this transformative dreaming, are invitations. Each step is an invitation that engages not just a young person, but again, that caring community around them to support them in activating these dreams. The first is building the foundation. This foundation, just to the point that was said so beautifully earlier, that we need to make sure that our young people's needs are being met, and that they know that their relationship with others around them, so that they feel that support and that nurturing and protection because they belong to us. And one of the things that I've said about restorative justice, and this is true across many of the different practices of restorative justice, is that we see ourselves as a whole. So again, when one of us needs support or has harmed one of us, how do we make that circle whole again? Because you belong. So building the foundation is about acknowledging and affirming the belonging. The second is creating the invitation and asking folks to accept that invitation, to cultivate that awareness that we have that space and permission to dream, because we have that power to dream of something different, something beyond even just the moment that's in front of us. And I believe that once we know our needs are met and we belong, and there's folks who care about us, who are holding that circle for us to dream, then we can accept that invitation with a bit more trust, and understand that we can ground ourselves in a deeper awareness about the power of dreaming of our futures. The third is the actual practice of dreaming that we call dreamscaping, which is essentially deepening that expansive space in imagination, so you can have bigger, bolder dreams about your future, what is needed around you in your community, and really tapping into that radical imagination and creativity, again, towards the purpose of healing and the purpose of creating something that's actionable, which is where we get in step 4, which is dream unlocking. Manifesting those dreams, even in places and spaces that try to constrain them. One of the, I'll be remiss if I didn't say, one of our upcoming partnerships will actually be with Courage in Oakland as part of that youth diversion program in Alameda County, to create what's called the Rebirth of Sound recording studio. It's a production program that starts as, I'll call it, I've been saying playfully, is almost like a Trojan horse. It's not a Trojan horse because we lead with this. It's a studio, a recording production studio, but as one of our star students have said, in facilities where we've installed these recording studios, the music comes last, and the music is great, but the music is a vehicle of creative expression, advocacy, and healing, and is rooted in healing, again, to start as in somatic practice and in circle to create the space of dreaming something different and creating something that flows from there. In that same spirit, dream unlocking is that practice that we can strengthen that resilience to manifest dreams, even in places and spaces and situations where that dream might have felt distant, if not just a luxury that we can't even access. And the final step is celebrating that moment of now. There's a deep sense of gratitude that we're able to engage in the practice of dreaming, but knowing that we have that power and celebrating that power. So that is why you will often hear us say, not just dreaming about a possible future, but a just and joyful one. And we say just again when that circle is made whole again. And everyone who belongs to that circle has their needs met, and also joyful that folks are growing, healing, thriving in community. And it's not just a utopian, like there's no conflict. No, we operate in the real world. We got 10 toes down on the ground here, right? But we do know that even in those moments, if not especially in those moments where it feels like it's a heavy moment, that celebrating the now, celebrating our dreams and tapping into that power brings that light. So those are the 5 steps. Each one has a curriculum and practices that we want folks to engage with, learn more about, practice in their communities, and also help amplify, because this is, again, an invitation where we're able to grow with those who do this on the day-to-day. And we want to make sure that we're meeting that moment that young people need in this urgent time. What are ways that we could show up for our young people to amplify and activate at the power of their dreams?
Excellent. Thank you, Calvin. And I'm off mute this time. Yes. Okay, good. So I'm going to do one more quick lightning round, just one question. So looking ahead, if you could ask everyone watching to take one action after today, what would it be? And we can start with Calvin and then go down.
One quick action I'll recommend: check out that Dream Resource Toolkit. Please use that in your organizations and engage with us so we can continue to learn and grow more. And also keep young people at the center. Nothing about us without us can ever be for us. So if we are in that deep relationship with young people, I believe that partnership will bring us towards that light.
Thank you. And to Abrigal?
Yeah, I would just compliment what Calvin said and say, like, try not to walk by at a young person. A smile and a check-in goes a long way. And I was that young person that I feel like there were things going on right on my neighborhood, right on my block, and I didn't even know what was happening in the building because an adult never pulled me over and just try to say hi or try to help me understand that. So I would say that piece. And then the other thing is, I mentioned earlier a little bit about mentoring. Find that young person that you can actually deposit some value of your experience, and share transparently and connect them to who you are and your expertise. Create space, you know what I mean? And that space means, could be a financial contribution, it could be your intellectual capacity, or it could just be lending an ear. But be a person that creates space for young people.
In that spirit of creating space, also develop funded youth advisory councils. Really look into your county budget, your state budget, and really just look at how under-resourced our communities are, and start advocating, start organizing, and start getting your young people and also like-minded adults together. I've seen it work where young people, you put money in their pockets, they're gonna show up, you feed them a hot meal, you're creating safe places, and they're seeing themselves in positions of leadership. And back to that confidence piece, my ask would really be like, step out the circle, like be different, like organize your young people. They know what is best for them and their environment, and really support that. And I would also just say, just follow our Instagram. It is Courage, which is CURYJ 510.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. I know we've got some questions in the chat, so I want to make sure we get to some of these before we hop off today. So looking into some of the questions, the first one that I'm seeing here: how can someone who's working with young people earn the trust of the youth that they're trying to support? And can you share any advice of how you've done that? That can go to anybody.
I can quickly, I would just say show up. show up to their graduation, show up to anything that you know that young people are going to. Because back to the point of like, young people know how many times people has failed them, so they're not gonna, they know that, you know, so the building the trust part is already hard. And also, like, don't be fake, you know, like, don't be scripted. Like, young people, he's hella fake, like, he's not about it. And be honest, keep it a buck. Like, let them allow yourself to let them hold you accountable too, because oftentimes, like, you are holding them accountable. But I have very successfully built a trust with young people for 5 years and more. And they've opened up to me by literally allowing them, back to that co-development collaboration piece and curriculum development, whatever it is, like, allow young people to also tell you where you were wrong. So it's also like a core part, a partnership and intergenerational learning. So that would be kind of like my advice.
Yeah, I would add to that, just say everything that was said, in a sense of also, honoring young people's skepticism about you, right? Like building trust is about building a relationship, and that takes time. And so, trust is something that established through levels of consistency. And so if you're consistently present and you're consistent in the attitude that you bring to young people, then they will share. But the skepticism is real. And the one thing I think that we miss, especially with young people who have had some traumatic experiences, is that they have a third eye. They know who's being real, who's being fake, and when you're trying to come to them with your agenda, and it's not about them and what they need or their agenda, they can feel that off the top. And so, when we approach them with just naturally who we are, over time, they will open up. But that's a process, and sometimes because we have missions, visions, and agendas, we want to rush the process of getting to know each other, but they're not on our time, they're on their time. So I would say just remember that in the process of engagement.
Thank you so much. And one more question really quick. We got a couple minutes left. So what was the first or perhaps most memorable moment where you felt you were truly seeing progress in a young person that you or your organization was helping?
I would say that for the type of work that we do in empowering young people, there are many young people. We just had our 32nd annual gala last week on last Thursday, and the speech series was all young people. And all of the young people talked about when they first came into the space with other young people and didn't even want to talk, didn't even want to like share, didn't even want to like, they were like, why am I even here? I want to go in the other direction. And to see them on stage and see them at the place where that they are informed and actually taking the initiative and being proactive on addressing issues, like, I mean, that happens over and over again because of the framework that we have young people walking into. So for me, that's like the ultimate trigger, is when you see a young person who's really disconnected from connecting with other people, because they've been in isolation. I mean, let's be frank, man. You got kids that can be gang members from their bedroom now, right? They never touch foot on a corner. They can actually put on a do-rag, do whatever, and be like a social media gang member, right? So they never interacted with any of the things they're talking about. But then when you get them in space, right, and they start to realize that these profiles that they're setting up and these engagements that they're having are unhealthy and really can cost them their life, and they start to redirect that and start to think about ways that they can actually transform or redirect that energy, those are like the biggest moments for me.
Yeah, briefly for me, I know that courage is making an impact because young people are coming back. They're coming back and they're bringing friends, and they're starting to really reclaim that space. And another a factor for me is when they start opening up to personal issues. I have this young person who, unfortunately, he's 17 and his mom kicked him out the house. And sometimes young people want to, they don't want to know, they don't want to share, like, oh, I'm homeless, because there's a stigma, or oh, I can't really tell on this young person because that street culture about snitching. But when they know and they're informed that they're speaking up because courage is not just gonna blame in, it's your fault. We're gonna look into the bigger picture, like, all right, what's that policy or what's that change that we can do, and you can do something about it. Let me teach you how. That's when, and we're seeing more and more of that, where young people are not only just blaming the system, but they're actually like, hold on, like, who's the CEO? who's the boss? Who is this one person that got the power to change this? So when we start seeing young people talk like that and taking the mic and literally like talking to reporters, getting on that fellowship to do participatory research, and we're starting to see that leadership pipeline actually really work. That's how we know that our model is it's working, and we just need to just support our young people. And when they're young, when they're showing up and not getting paid, because once you go through the fellowship, like, all right, you got paid for them 9 months, but then after, when they're not getting paid, that's how you know that you're organizing and you're creating your base of young people, because they're coming back not just for money, but they're coming back because they believe that they can change systems and policies that impact real people's lives.
Yeah, and if I may really quickly, might speak to that because I've been in youth development now for 23 years, and like the focus used to be on like career pathways, and that's what young people were being driven towards, right? And now more than ever, when you start talking about youth development, you want to be in spaces where they can actually be policy, create policy changes, right? Really have impact on community, change like these structures, like that's what young people are investing. I mean, right here in Boston, just in our Boston site. We get over 500 applications for 45 paid slots annually. Yeah, like literally, like we have to turn the phones off. It's just showing that young people, as much as we think that young people are disconnected, they actually want to connect, but they want to connect in the way that they feel is meaningful to them. And that adds to what Calvin's saying, because we have like what we call TE Studios here at Teen Empowerment, which is a studio form of arts for social justice. And young people get to express, like they run parallel with our core program, and they get to create albums. They just create eight songs that are actually focused on the priority issues that the core programs focus on. So they get to put together this package that is like fun and entertaining, but educating at the same time, and using their own vehicles of expression. So, it's a different day. We got to create these spaces for young people to be involved and engaged, but we got to help them understand how to actually also engage with levels of diplomacy so that they don't end up on the other side of the door and can't create the change that they want to see, right? So some of it is being combative, but a lot of it is like, how do you make this issue? How do you articulate this in a way that's diplomatic enough for it to resonate with leaders so that the change that you want to see can come about and you don't end up on the other side of the door?
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our incredible panelists today and to all who joined us. I think today's conversation really reminds us that when we invest in youth leaders, especially for those who have experienced systemic harm, we create new pathways for justice, belonging, and opportunity. So if you'd like to learn more, stay in touch with us on social media, American Student Assistance, Center for Teen Empowerment, Courage, and Free to Dream. Thank you to everybody, and we'll see you next time.